Hello, good evening. It is Monday, August 11th. My name is Eric Wiedeke. I'm joined today by Austin Dobbins. It's another episode here of Marlins Monday. Um, it has been a crazy week. Uh, it just kind of shows the amount that can change in a week over this past week here for the Marlins. But before we do get into that, Austin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Yourself?
I'm doing all right. I'm sure you could kind of hear that I'm still getting over a little bit of a bug, but we persist onwards here. And uh, speaking of rough weeks, it was a rough week for the Marlins. 2-6. Um, really started with a pretty poor performance against the Astros in the first two games of the series. They do salvage that, winning the last game, but then you go into Atlanta, kind of riding high. This team is confidence is at an all-time high. You go in, you see your division rival, and you get crushed. I mean, it wasn't really even a competitive series. There were games that were competitive within the series, but it just felt like such a deflating 5 games for the Marlins in Atlanta. Um, and kind of a failure at just about every level. Austin, you're a Rays guy, so you have more of an outside perspective on this. What did you see in those 5 games?
Yeah, this is going to be a different analogy than most people may use, but this kind of seemed like the rookie versus the vet. You've seen the Braves; they're struggling this season, way below expectations, um, and they just kind of handle business better than the Marlins did. The Marlins, they saw themselves get out to that big lead in Game 1, um, and they just weren't able to play with that lead. And what I see is a rookie manager who struggled in the decision-making field, um, which we'll get further into, specifically with his decisions with the bullpen in certain situations, putting low leverage guys in high leverage situations, choosing not to use his high leverage relievers in high leverage situations. And I think the Braves just kind of did what they were supposed to do. Their record may not show that that's what they're supposed to do, but I think this series was a chance for the Marlins, especially the way the Mets have been playing, to kind of put themselves in the playoff race. Um, and I think it just showed that they are not a playoff team, even with the run that they've been on, which has been awesome to watch from everybody across the league. They've seen a lot of young talent blossom into their full potential, and not even reaching the top level of that. But it was just a case of the older, more experienced team getting the best of their little brother.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to be one of those things where until the Marlins beat the Braves, that's just going to be what it is. And you mentioned the bullpen decisions, and I do want to touch on that. Um, One of the things that I think was interesting is, so much has been made about the Marlins back end between Calvin Fauché and Ronnie Enriquez and Anthony Bender, and how good those guys have kind of been as their, last 3 guys to kind of bridge to the end of the game. And what struck me was those guys were hardly used in Atlanta. I think they combined for 4 1/3 of the 13 total innings that were pitched by the bullpen. And I know you look at the games and you see a couple of 7-1s in there, but those are games that were broken open when the Josh Simpsons, the Tyler Zubers of the world were pitching for the Marlins. The Valente Bellozos of the world were in there for the Marlins. Um, you bring in Josh Simpson, who I understand you maybe want to go with the lefty righty split. In certain situations you want to play the matchups, but number one, I don't know why or when or where the switch flipped to where Josh Simpson became your preferred lefty in those situations to a guy like Cade Gibson, who had been, better over a longer stretch throughout the season. Um, But at a certain point, I also think you have to look at the other guys in your bullpen and say, regardless of matchup, our guys are our guys, and you have three really good high leverage arms that you could be throwing out in those situations. And it just kind of felt like they were saving themselves because it was a 5-game series and they didn't want to tax these guys. But the moment to use them never came because they were just holding them back for some reason or another. And I don't understand why McCullough did it. It's been kind of a theme all year long that he's made these questionable decisions. I mean, and it cost them at least one game in this series, maybe even two.
Yeah, you could definitely make the argument for 2 games there, and I think, like I said, that's part of. Obviously, McCullough he is still a rookie manager. These are the things that you hope that he can improve upon, but there wasn't a lot of, for a better way to put it, he wasn't coaching with a lot of feel. It all seemed very analytical, and like you started at the top of the show, me being a Rays guy and paying attention a lot to them, that's kind of how Kevin Cash manages. And we've seen in 2020 pulling Blake Snell amidst his best career start in the World Series, and the analytical decisions aren't always the best decisions. So that's where I'll leave with that.
No, I think that there's definitely room for feel in those discussions. I mean, it just I find it odd because it's the same. It just feels like two polar opposite decisions, right? Where they've been really cautious with their starters all year long, but then you go to the second game, and Edward Cabrera was through 7 innings at 96 pitches. I was not expecting him to go out in the 8th inning, but they let him go out in the 8th inning. He pitches well over 100, has the best start of his career. Him and Jacob Marcy, if your names aren't Edward Cabrera, Jacob Marcy, or Xavier Edwards, you kind of had a rough week on the Marlins, and that's really kind of just what it was. But it just felt like a polar opposite decision just from the core of it, from how he treated the rest of his staff the entire series, except for Sandy. And that's been a pet peeve of mine all year, is that he's coming back from Tommy John surgery, and it just feels like all year long they've just taken the guy for granted, to where, oh yeah, it's Sandy, we can let him go, he'll figure it out. He hasn't figured it out to this point. And it's not that he can't, but you're not doing the guy any favors by keeping him in there. You're just not. But then you flip it on the other hand, and you go to the very next game, and you have Cal Quantrill, who 4 innings, 1-run ball, 47 pitches, and he gets pulled. I mean, it just, there's
you can't. It's inexcusable. It really is. It's hard to even try and analyze it because it doesn't make sense. It just really doesn't. And that's a competitive ball game in the 4th inning, and then you instantly go to the bullpen, you instantly give up runs. And the way baseball is a funny game. When it's not working, it's not working at all. If the pitching isn't working, then the hitting isn't working. And when you can't put together a complete baseball game and the week just drags on, it gets tough, especially if we don't normally see 5-game series in the first place, but then you start, losing games you shouldn't, and then they get extended. Guys, are put in spots that they probably shouldn't be. Guys are wanting to get put in those spots. And it's a fine line between, like you talked about, like one game doing it the analytical way, the next day playing it with feel. So I would say Clay McCullough had a rough weekend just as much as the Marlins did.
Yeah, and it wasn't just McCullough, and it wasn't just the pitching staff. I mean, when you go an entire series, a 5-game series, mind you, with the lack of production from guys that have been giving you that middle of the order presence all year long in Augustine Ramirez and Kyle Stowers, I think those two guys specifically kind of scuffling is if you're going to point the finger at something offensively, because there's plenty of blame to point there. They scored 1 run in 2 out of the 5 games. You weren't going to win scoring 1 run in either of those games. And I think that kind of falls really on those guys. And when, you're the guys that have gained that reputation, Kyle Stowers being an all-star this season, Augustine Ramirez, we've seen the hype that he's gotten. Those are the guys that kind of have to carry your offense. And when they're not performing, it's great that Xavier Edwards is getting on base as much as he is, but who's driving him in? Because it's not Kyle Stowers and it's not Augustine Ramirez. I think that there's a case to be made at this point that Jacob Marcy needs to be moved up into the order. I know they moved him. He started off hitting 9th. He's moved up to the 6th spot. I think that there's a case to be made that he's kind of an ideal number 2 hitter, maybe number 3 guy, to maybe kind of just get some juice going back in the top of your order. But you're not going to get a lot of production with your best power guys going cold like that at the same time.
Yeah, and just for numbers' sake, Stowers was 2 for 19 this weekend against the Braves in the 5 games, and Augustine was 4 for 21. So
yeah.
That's not going to get it done in the middle of the order, no matter who is getting on in front of them. And just to build off of Marcy, because I think some people aren't realizing what we are witnessing with him, and to build on your case to move him up in the order, he's actually just about as ideal as you can get for that 2-hole spot. Part of the reason he's been so successful, and I found this earlier today, and he has a 14.5% whiff rate according to Baseball Savant, which is 10% lower than the MLB average, and he's not qualified to be ranked, but it would be in one of the higher percentile rates in the MLB. And then he has an amazing eye at the plate as well. His chase rate is 10.7%. The MLB average is 29%. So he started 13 for 31. His OPS is like 1280, I think. And he's walking too. I mean,
Yep.
he's been I think about it. I mean, better replacement than you would have ever imagined when you trade away Jesus Sanchez just a week prior. So I just want to give him his flowers, and it's an unfortunate circumstance that the Marlins couldn't do what they need to do against the Braves this weekend. But there was still a lot of good, even in the darkness of the series.
Yeah, and I think that there's really a lot of intriguing kind of possibilities with a guy like Marcy towards the top of the order, because I think honestly you could flip-flop him and Edwards 1-2 however you want, because they're both guys that have ideal bat to ball skills. Mm-hmm. And I think Marcy might even be a little bit better on the bases. I mean, he's already got 5 steals in, what is it now, 9-10 games?
Yeah, something like
at this point. But then you also, I don't think people kind of anticipated him having the power that he's shown, because you look at the average exit velocity, it's towards the top end of the league right now. I think it's about 92 is the average exit velocity off the bat for Marcy. And I mean, it's a really simple idea, but hitting really is a lot easier when you're forcing the pitcher to throw you strikes. And he knows what, and the whiff rate is low. He's not missing when he's getting those pitches in the zone. And that just makes him such a difficult player to pitch to. And it's just such a unique thing for a young player to see that. So I do think that moving him up in the order is not only justified, I think it's kind of needed, to give them a little bit more juice, because if you can get guys like Edwards and Marcy on early on, it puts a lot of pressure on opposing defenses. Pitchers have to worry about the stolen base.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just creating a lot of havoc.
And they got to pick who to pitch to too. I mean, if they're going to have to attack one of the 4 really good hitters on the team, and we've seen what they can do with pitches in the zone when they don't chase. I mean, we've seen the potential from top to bottom with this lineup. So,
Yeah, because I mean, if you get into a position where Edwards and Marcy are on, you want to pitch to Stowers because you don't want to load the bases to see Ramirez with the bases loaded. You just don't want to do that. So I do think that there's still some interesting possibilities for them. I don't think that Stowers is going to hit at a 2 for 19 clip for the remainder of the season. I don't think Ramirez is going to do the same. I think those guys will bounce back. The pitching staff I'm a little bit more concerned about, particularly Sandy and Junk. And I mean, I don't know what they even think of Quantrill at this point, if they're only going to throw him 4 innings. So I do have concerns there. But, I mean, at this point, I'm already ready to see Robbie Snelling. I know the organization, probably for service time purposes, isn't. But I'm there with it at this point. I do want to flash forward here to the series in Cleveland, because it is a really tough road trip upcoming for the Marlins. You get 3 against Cleveland, and then you get 3 against a pretty hot Red Sox team right now in Boston. And the pitching matchups on paper for the Marlins, I would say in Cleveland, on paper that I would say they've got one where they have the clear advantage, one where it's about a draw, and then one where they're clearly disadvantaged. I think that the pivot point is going to be that middle game where it's Yuri versus Gavin Williams. Williams has been one of the best pitchers in the American League so far in the second half. Bottom line is the Marlins are going to have to just be better all around. They're going to need the hitters to pick it up, and they're going to need McCullough to manage the bullpen like he did 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They need to put together a complete game this upcoming series, and the closest thing we saw to it in the Braves series was Cabrera's start. So
yep.
It's a good matchup for the Marlins. The Guardians don't hit for too much power. Their lineup is kind of just average, if not one of the worst ones in the MLB. So you're gonna see a potential for Junk, Yuri, and Cabrera to shine again. They're gonna be on full-fledged attack and be able to go after the Guardians hitters to the best of their ability. And then the pitching matchup, the hitting will pick up. A lot of the players in the lineup are too good to have that cold of a stretch over 5 games. They get today off. It'll good refresh, reset the mind, and go in. I'm not going to call it a big series because there's 6 games back, but for a young team that's on the rise, we can all agree with that. It is a big series, not necessarily for this year, but for the future. So,
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, you mentioned it. They're still technically only 6 games back. I kind of roll my eyes at myself even as I say that, but I know that there's some people that are still watching for postseason, and you know what, good for them. I'm glad that they're even in a position where it's still something that you have to kind of take at least half seriously. But ultimately, this is going to be a big series for them, just from the perspective of going on the road, playing quality teams, and showing a little bit of mental fortitude after a really, really tough week. I think if there's one thing that people have kind of grown to admire about this Marlins team, it's been their bounce back. Obviously, you don't go 15 games under and then back to 500 without, being able to have some of that mental toughness. And they'll just have to show more of that on this road trip if they're going to continue to be, relevant here into August and September. But let's talk about something that's always relevant, and that's going to be Prize Picks. So kind of mixing a little bit here as we shift gears here to the Prize Picks slate for today. it is Marlins Monday, but that does not mean it's not Money Monday. So yeah, right. Hey, that's pretty good. That's
You
pretty
came
good.
up with that on the spot. That's good.
Yeah.
This isn't scripted.
It is unscripted. Uh, so we have a pretty short slate, honestly, smaller slate for MLB today, but a good one here. And looking at it, Austin, I'm gonna start with you. Which is your favorite play of the day here as
Yeah,
we
so
look at the Prize Picks board?
I'm just gonna go super simple. I'm gonna go back to what was working. It's been ice cold. He's
Yep.
been very cold. The team's been very cold, and I think their manager may or may not be on the hot seat. But Aaron Judge, the Yankees come back home. They play the Minnesota Twins, who are struggling just as much. The Yankees have Rodon on the mound today. The Yankees have Aaron Judge is more than likely going to win another MVP this year, and he needs to show that he is the MVP, and it starts in just a simple series facing an inferior opponent. So Aaron Judge's fantasy score, they just pulled the pitcher, so I don't know what's going on in Minnesota, but the Twins aren't a very good baseball team. They give up a lot of runs. Aaron Judge, we all know he's doing things that we haven't seen in a very long time. So I'm just going to be simple. Aaron Judge fantasy score. I expect him to go yard today. That's it.
So
It's every time you share the screen.
I know it's every time. Every time the screen gets shared. All right, yeah. So, Andrew Haney under 17 fantasy points. Andrew Haney, not a good pitcher. Brewers, good baseball team. I think it's just as simple as that.
Yeah, pretty simple there.
Yeah, I'm keeping it very very simple. Austin, your second play for today.
Yeah, so I'm going with the same kind of strategy here. A very good pitcher against a very average lineup. Nathan Eovaldi, he's been insane this season. I don't think he gets as much credit as he maybe should just because of the way the Rangers are playing. If you just want anybody to take the time to go and look at his stats, he's 10-3 with a 1.38 ERA. He has 111 strikeouts. He's only given up 5 homers. I mean, he's been insanely dominant. He's been one of the best pitchers in the MLB. His last start against the Yankees, he went 8 innings with 6 strikeouts. Before that, 7 against the Angels. He struck out 8 Astros over 7 innings of work 2 weeks ago. He's been on a heater, simply stated. So I'm going with his strikeouts. You can do his fantasy score if you want. They're both in right around the number that if he gets the strikeouts, the fantasy score will also should be around in that realm. So Nathan Eovaldi.
All right, so my next pick is actually going to be a former Ray going up against his old ball club, and it's going to be Jeffrey Springs over 4.5 strikeouts. He's gone over that number in 4 out of 5 ball games. The Rays over their last 3 have struck out about 9.5 times per game. That's number 5 most in baseball of late. So a little bit of a swing and miss going there, and I think Jeffrey Springs does take advantage of that tonight. Austin, your third pick?
Yes, I'm going to go with a former Marlin to get a hit with Luis Ariz. He is 9 for 17 off Logan Webb. He just had a huge series against the Red Sox. He was pretty dominant there. I think he batted around I know he had 2 hits each game against the Red Sox. That I don't know what the average is, but he has good success off Webb. He's coming off a great series. So Luis Ariz for a hit.
All right, and my last play for today is actually going to be Chris Paddock. And I'm going to go with a demon here. I'm going to go over 5.5 hits allowed against the White Sox. I think 5.5 as a demon is a little bit low for a demon, especially for a guy that's given up 6, 8, and 11 hits in 3 out of his last 5 games. And against the White Sox lineup that is hitting pretty well and has some good young left-handed bats, I think that they'll be able to jump on Paddock today. Austin, your final play of the day?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to a little rivalry in the West Coast between the Angels and the Dodgers, and I'm going to go with Yamamoto strikeouts. The Angels lineup is pretty terrible. I'm going to be honest. They have some guys, but there's a lot of swing and miss. There's a lot of holes in those bats. And Yamamoto looks for revenge against the Angels, as the Angels went into Dodger Stadium and swept them earlier this season. So I look for Yamamoto to kind of close the door on the Angels' playoff hopes tonight and put them 7 games under 500.
All right, and there you have it. That is our prize picks segment here on Marlins Monday. It is always a pleasure to have you on, Austin. Appreciate you jumping on with me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, was a lot of fun, even through the internet issues. I will see you guys next week, next Monday, hopefully after a much better week for the Marlins. In between, there will be more prize pick streams with me and Austin. So we will see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching and have a good one.